The huge metal doors of the Galactic Council chamber opened with a soft hiss. Inside, creatures from across the galaxy sat in their special seats, each one designed for their different body types. Some had 4 arms, others had tentacles instead of legs, and a few glowed with strange lights from inside their bodies. Ambassador Quan Tai Ho walked slowly into the chamber. He was still getting used to the small device planted behind his ear. The translator made all the weird alien sounds turn into words he could understand. Sometimes it worked perfectly, but other times the voices sounded like robots talking. Quan wore the simple blue uniform that Earth had chosen for its representatives. Next to all the fancy robes and shining armor that other species wore, he looked very plain. That was exactly what everyone expected from humans. 6 months ago, the Galactic Council had finally let Earth join their group. It was not because they respected humans. It was more like when adults let a small child sit at the grown-up table during dinner. They thought it was cute, but they did not really take the child seriously. Admiral Yoon Ji-woo sat in the viewing area above the main floor. She watched as the different alien representatives talked to each other before the meeting started. Some of them had voices that sounded like music. Others made noises like machines grinding together. The translator in her ear worked hard to make sense of it all. Yoon had been the commander of Earth's small space fleet for 3 years now. She had seen how the other species looked at human ships. Their vessels were simple metal boxes compared to the flowing, artistic designs that aliens preferred. Human weapons were basic projectile guns, while aliens used fancy energy beams that could slice through mountains. The meeting began when a tall, silver creature stood up at the center podium. Counselor Vexathara of the Hegemony was one of the most powerful beings in known space. Her people controlled dozens of star systems and had weapons that could destroy entire planets. Today, we discuss the recent conflict between the Vorthak Empire and the Zalani Republic, Vexathara announced. Her voice came through the translator as cold and sharp, like metal scraping against ice. The chamber's main screen lit up with images from the battle. Yoon watched as Vorthak warships fired bright red energy beams at Zalani defensive stations. The beams cut through the station's shields like they were made of paper. Explosions bloomed in space as the Zalani forces were completely destroyed. The Vorthak Empire's new plasma cannons proved most effective, said War Commander Thex Alice, a large creature that looked like a cross between a dragon and a robot. Our energy output has increased by 40% since last year. Other representatives nodded with respect. In this galaxy, power meant everything. The species with the strongest energy weapons got the best planets, the richest trade routes, and the most respect. Dr. Park Min-soo sat in the human observation section, taking notes on everything he saw. He was Earth's top weapons scientist, and every battle recording made him think harder about humanity's position in this galaxy. While aliens focused on making their energy weapons more powerful, Dr. Park was working on something completely different. The meeting continued with reports from different conflicts across the galaxy. Each story was the same. Whoever had better energy weapons won the fight. Plasma cannons, ion beams, particle accelerators, these were the tools that decided who lived and who died among the stars. Captain Lee So-young, sitting next to Dr. Park, whispered quietly. They all used the same basic approach. Convert energy into destructive force and throw it at the enemy. Dr. Park nodded. For months he had been studying these battle reports. Every alien species in the galaxy had followed the same path of development. They had discovered how to manipulate energy and built their entire military philosophy around it. It made sense. Energy weapons were flashy, impressive, and seemed very advanced. But Dr. Park knew something that the aliens had forgotten. Sometimes the simplest solutions were the best ones. When the meeting moved to new business, Counselor Vexathara called for the human delegation to present their request. Ambassador Quan stood up slowly and walked to the speaking area, the chamber, became quieter as representatives turned to look at the human. The Earth government requests mining rights in the Kepler 442 system, Quan said in his calm voice. We believe the asteroid fields there contain materials useful for our industrial development. Several aliens made sounds that the translator turned into laughter. Science Prime Kelvar of the Nexari Consortium actually stood up to respond. "And how does your species plan to extract these materials?" Kelvar asked. "Your mining techniques are quite primitive compared to our energy-based extraction methods." Quan remained calm even though he could feel the disrespect in the room. "We plan to use kinetic bombardment to break apart the larger asteroids, then collect the fragments with our harvesting ships." The laughter got louder. Kinetic bombardment meant throwing rocks at other rocks until they broke apart. To these advanced alien civilizations, it sounded like something cavemen would do. "How charming," Vexathera said, her metallic voice dripping with amusement. "Your species still believes in throwing objects at your problems. We suppose even Stone Age techniques have their place in the galaxy." War Commander Thexalis leaned forward in his seat. "Perhaps the humans would benefit from observing more advanced species at work. We could demonstrate proper energy-based mining techniques." More laughter filled the chamber. Admiral Yoon felt her hands form into fists as she watched from above. Dr. Park's jaw tightened, but he kept taking notes. Captain Lee looked like she wanted to say something, but she knew this was not the time. Ambassador Quan finished his presentation and returned to his seat. The council approved the mining rights request, but only because the system was considered worthless. Let the primitive humans play with rocks in empty space, while the real civilizations claim the valuable planets. As the meeting ended, representatives from different species gathered in small groups to discuss trade deals and military alliances. None of them approached the human delegation. Humans were too new, too weak, and too primitive to be worth talking to. Admiral Yoon, Dr. Park, and the others made their way back to their ship in silence. Only when they were safely aboard did anyone speak. 3 years, Dr. Park said quietly. 3 years of listening to them treat us like children playing with toys. "The project?" Yoon asked. "Almost ready," Dr. Park replied. "When it is, they will never laugh at human weapons again." Captain Lee looked at the notes Dr. Park had taken during the meeting. Page after page of energy weapon specifications, shield, frequencies, and tactical data. "You really think it will work?" Dr. Park smiled for the first time that day. "They have spent so long perfecting energy weapons that they have forgotten the most basic law of physics. For every action, there is an equal and opposite reaction. Sometimes the old ways are the best ways." As their ship left the council station and headed back toward Earth, none of the alien representatives bothered to watch them go. They had more important things to discuss than a species that still threw rocks at its problems. That was their first mistake. Dr. Park Min-soo stood in front of the longest weapon ever built by human hands. The railgun stretched almost 1 kilometer through the underground facility beneath Seoul. The metal rails ran perfectly straight, supported by massive concrete pillars that went deep into the Earth's bedrock. The weapon did not look like the fancy energy cannons that aliens used. There were no glowing crystals or spinning parts. Instead, it looked more like a giant version of the train tracks that connected cities across Earth. But these tracks could do something that no alien weapon could match. Captain Lee So-young walked beside Dr. Park as they inspected the final preparations. Her military boots echoed in the huge underground chamber. The sound bounced off the walls and came back to them several seconds later. "The electromagnetic coils are charged to full power," she reported, reading from her tablet. "All safety systems are green. The targeting computer is online and ready." Dr. Park nodded as he looked at the readouts on his screen. 3 years of work had led to this moment. 3 years of calculations, testing, and rebuilding when things went wrong. 3 years of listening to aliens call humans primitive, while secretly building the most advanced kinetic weapon in the galaxy. Engineer Choi Dong-hyun, climbed down from the control platform above them. His coveralls were dirty from working on the delicate electronics that made the railgun function. Unlike alien energy weapons that required exotic materials and complex power sources, the railgun used simple physics principles that humans had understood for centuries. "The projectile loading system is ready," Choi reported. "We can fire up to 6 rounds per minute once the capacitors recharge between shots." The projectiles themselves were simple pieces of tungsten carbide metal, each one about the size of a human fist. They weighed exactly 50 kilograms and were perfectly shaped to cut through space with minimal resistance. No explosives, no energy fields, no complicated guidance systems. Just very hard metal moving very fast. Lieutenant Kim Hye-jin monitored the communication arrays from her station near the entrance. Her job was to make sure no one outside Earth knew what they were building. The project was so secret that even most of Earth's government did not know about it. "All external communications are normal," Kim reported. "The cover story is holding. As far as anyone knows, this is just a new subway tunnel project." The cover story had been Admiral Yoon's idea. Seoul's subway system was famous for being one of the most advanced in the world. Building new tunnels was normal, and no one would suspect that one of those tunnels contained a weapon that could change the balance of power in the galaxy. Dr. Park walked to the control room and sat down at the main console. The screens around him showed every detail of the railgun's condition. Power levels, magnetic field strength, projectile position, targeting data, everything needed to fire the most precise weapon ever created. "Tell me about the test results." "Again," Captain Lee said as she joined him at the console. Dr. Park pulled up the data from their latest trial. Yesterday's test projectile reached 12% of light speed. At that velocity, the kinetic energy alone equals a small nuclear weapon. But unlike a nuclear weapon, there is no radiation, no electromagnetic pulse, and no warning. The mathematics were beautiful in their simplicity. Kinetic energy equaled half the mass times velocity squared. When the velocity reached 12% of light speed, even a small projectile carried enormous destructive power. The aliens had spent centuries perfecting energy weapons, but they had forgotten that moving mass could be just as deadly. Engineer Choi brought up the shield penetration. Calculations on another screen. "We tested against samples of every known shield technology in the galaxy. Energy shields, particle barriers, magnetic deflectors. None of them can stop a solid projectile moving at relativistic speeds." This was the key insight that Dr. Park had discovered. Alien civilizations had become so focused on energy-based warfare that their defenses were designed only to stop energy-based attacks. A simple piece of metal moving fast enough would pass right through their shields like they did not exist. Captain Lee smiled as she read the test reports. "How long did it take their best computers to calculate the impact?" "Their computers never saw it coming," Dr. Park replied. "At 12% of light speed, our projectile crosses the distance between Earth and Moon in 10 seconds. Most alien sensor systems cannot track something that small moving that fast." The beauty of the railgun was not just its power, but its invisibility. Energy weapons created bright flashes and heat signatures that could be detected across star systems. The railgun's projectile was cold, dark, and smaller than most space debris. By the time enemy sensors detected it, the projectile would already be hitting its target. Lieutenant Kim looked up from her communication station. "Admiral Yoon is requesting an update on the timeline." Dr. Park checked the final preparation schedule. "Tell the Admiral we will be ready for the first field test in 72 hours. The orbital platform construction is almost complete." The key orbital platform was the next phase of the project. Building a railgun on Earth was impressive, but putting one in space would give humanity the ability to strike targets anywhere in their local star systems. The platform was being assembled in secret, disguised as a new communication satellite. Engineer Choi pulled up the construction reports from orbit. The assembly crews finished installing the main rails yesterday. The power systems will be online tomorrow, and the targeting array will be calibrated by the end of the week. Captain Lee studied the orbital platform's specifications. Unlike the Earth-based Railgun, which was built for testing and demonstration, the space platform was designed for actual combat. It could rotate to target any point in three-dimensional space and had enough stored power for 20 shots before needing to recharge. "What about ammunition supply?" she asked. "Already solved," Dr. Park replied. "The platform includes a manufacturing facility that can produce projectiles from raw materials. As long as we keep it supplied with metal, it can make its own ammunition." The manufacturing facility was another human innovation that aliens would not expect. While alien weapons required complex energy cells and exotic materials, the railgun could literally turn space junk into deadly projectiles. Old satellites, asteroid fragments, even pieces of destroyed ships could be melted down and reformed into ammunition. Lieutenant Kim received another message from Earth's government. "The diplomatic situation is getting worse. The Vorthak Empire has started harassing our mining ships in the Kepler system. They are claiming that humans are taking too long to extract the materials." Dr. Park's expression grew cold. The Vorthak Empire was one of the most aggressive species in the galaxy. Their warships were heavily armed with plasma cannons and protected by multiple layers of energy shields. They had never been defeated in direct combat, and they knew it. "How many ships are they using to harass our miners?" Captain Lee asked. "Intelligence reports say it is just one patrol vessel," Kim replied. "The Vorthak probably think one ship is enough to intimidate humans." Engineer Choi looked at Dr. Park with a questioning expression. "Are we really going to test the orbital platform against a live target?" Dr. Park was quiet for a long moment as he considered the question. They had planned to test the railgun against an unmanned target first, something safe that would not start an interstellar war. But the Vorthak harassment was the perfect opportunity to send a message to the entire galaxy. "The Vorthak ship is violating the mining agreement," Dr. Park said finally. "They have no legal right to interfere with our operations. If something unfortunate happened to a ship that was breaking galactic law, who could complain?" Captain Lee understood immediately. "The test target just volunteered itself." Dr. Park began entering targeting data into the orbital platform systems. The Vorthak patrol ship was currently 4 million kilometers away from the hidden railgun platform. At that distance, traditional weapons would be useless. Energy beams would disperse and missiles would take hours to reach their target. But a railgun projectile traveling at 12% of light speed would cross that distance in less than 2 minutes. "Begin final preparations," Dr. Park ordered. "It is time to show the galaxy what human engineering can accomplish." As the team worked to ready humanity's first space-based railgun, none of them realized they were about to change the course of galactic history. The Vorthak Empire was about to learn that harassing humans was a very dangerous mistake. The galaxy was about to discover that sometimes the old ways were the most effective ways. War leader Grex Noth sat in his command chair aboard the Vorthak warship Dominance Eternal. The ship was a perfect example of Vorthak military power. Its dark hull bristled with plasma cannon turrets, and its shields could stop the energy weapons of 3 smaller vessels at once. Grexnoth was bored. Harassing human mining ships was not real combat. It was more like shooing away insects that had wandered into the wrong place. The humans barely had any weapons on their mining vessels, and they always ran away when his ship appeared. "Status. Report," Grexnoth growled to his sensor operator. "We are maintaining position at the edge of the asteroid field," the operator replied. "The human mining ships stopped working when they detected our presence. They are keeping their distance." Grexnoth made a sound that was like laughter mixed with grinding metal. "Good. Let them remember that this star system belongs to the Vorthak Empire, not to primitive newcomers." The Vorthak had controlled this region of space for over 200 years. When the Galactic Council gave mining rights to humans, the Empire had not been happy. but direct confrontation with the council would cause problems, so they had chosen a different approach. Harassment and intimidation would eventually force the humans to abandon their claims. On the bridge of his ship, Grexnoth watched the human mining vessels through his main screen. Their ships looked like ugly metal boxes compared to the sleek design of Vorthak warships. Human technology was at least 50 years behind anything the Empire used. "Sir, I am detecting some kind of energy signature," his sensor operator said suddenly. Grexnoth barely looked at the readings. "Where?" "From the third planet in this system. It appears to be electromagnetic in nature." "Probably their primitive communication array," Grexnoth said with dismissal. "These humans still use radio waves like children playing with toys. Ignore it." 4 million kilometers away, on the surface of Kepler 442c, Dr. Park Min-soo made the final adjustments to humanity's first combat railgun. The weapon had been assembled in complete secrecy over the past 8 months. Every component had been shipped separately and put together by engineer Choi Dong-hyun's team. The railgun platform sat hidden inside what looked like a normal mining facility. From space, it appeared to be just another human industrial complex. But underneath the fake buildings, the most powerful kinetic weapon ever created was preparing to fire. "Target acquired and locked," announced Captain Lee So-young from the targeting station. "Vorthak vessel bearing 772 Mark 15. Range is 4.3 million kilometers." Dr. Park checked the readings on his screen. At this distance, every energy weapon known to the galaxy would be completely useless. Plasma beams would spread out and lose power. Particle weapons would be deflected by solar radiation. Even the most advanced alien missiles would take hours to reach their target and could be easily detected and destroyed. But the railgun operated on principles that the galaxy had forgotten. Lieutenant Kim Hye-jin monitored the communication channels from her station. "All human vessels in the area have been warned to stay clear. Mining operations have stopped, and our ships are moving to safe distance." Engineer Choi ran through the final system. Checks. Electromagnetic coils are charged to maximum power. Projectile is loaded and ready. All safety systems are green. The projectile was a simple piece of tungsten carbide metal, carefully shaped for maximum penetration. It weighed 50 kilograms and contained no explosives or guidance systems. It did not need them. When accelerated to 12% of light speed, the projectile would carry more kinetic energy than most starship weapons. Dr. Park placed his hand on the firing control. 3 years of work had led to this moment. 3 years of enduring alien condescension and watching humanity be treated like a curiosity. 3 years of calculating and building while the galaxy laughed at human backwardness. "All stations report." "Ready?" Captain Lee confirmed. Dr. Park thought about every insult, every dismissive comment, every time an alien had called human technology primitive. The Vorthak were about to learn that sometimes primitive was exactly what the situation required. Fire. The railgun discharged with a sound like thunder mixed with tearing metal. Electromagnetic coils activated in perfect sequence, accelerating the tungsten projectile down the kilometer-long rails. In less than 1 second, the projectile reached 12% of light speed and launched into space. The projectile was invisible to most sensors. It produced no heat signature, no energy, trail, and no electromagnetic pulse. It was simply a small piece of very hard metal moving very fast through the vacuum of space. Aboard the Dominance Eternal, sensor operator Kexaval noticed something strange on his displays. "Sir, I am detecting an unusual reading." "What kind of reading?" Grexnoth asked without much interest. "I am not sure. It appears to be a small object moving at impossible speed." Grexnoth finally looked at the sensor data. What he saw made no sense. According to the readings, something was approaching his ship at a significant fraction of light speed, but that was impossible. No known weapon could accelerate anything to such velocities. "Check your instruments," Grexnoth ordered. "The readings must be wrong." Kexval ran a full diagnostic on his sensor array. All systems are functioning normally, sir. The object is definitely there, and it is definitely moving at 12% of light speed. The number hit Grexnoth like a physical blow. 12% of light speed meant a kinetic impact with the force of a nuclear weapon, but his ship's shields were designed to stop energy weapons, not solid projectiles. "Activate all defensive systems," Grexnoth roared. His crew scrambled to obey, but they were too late. The tungsten projectile had already crossed 4 million kilometers of space. Their sensors had detected it only in the final seconds before impact. The projectile hit the Dominance Eternal exactly in the center of its hull. The ship's energy shields, designed to deflect plasma beams and particle weapons, did not even register the incoming metal slug. The projectile passed through the shields like they were made of air. The tungsten carbide penetrator punched through the ship's armor plating as if it were paper. It continued through the hull, the internal bulkheads, the reactor compartment, and the rear armor before exiting into space on the other side. The hole it created was perfectly round and exactly 50 centimeters wide. For a brief moment, the ship remained intact. Then the kinetic energy transfer began to take effect. The impact had transferred enormous amounts of energy into the ship's structure. Metal began to bend and crack around the impact point. Internal systems failed as shock waves spread through the hull. The reactor containment field collapsed, and secondary explosions began throughout the ship. Grexnoth watched in horror as his mighty warship simply came apart. The Dominance Eternal broke into 3 large pieces and dozens of smaller fragments. The plasma cannons that had made the ship so feared went dark. The shields that had protected it from countless battles flickered and died. In less than 10 seconds, one of the Vorthak Empire's most powerful warships had been reduced to floating debris. The final transmission from the Dominance Eternal was a confused report from sensor operator Kexval. "Unknown weapon impact. Ship is breaking apart. No energy signature detected. Cause unknown." Then the communication went silent. Across the galaxy, automated monitoring stations detected the destruction of a major Vorthak warship. The sensor readings made no sense. There had been no energy weapon discharge, no missile launch, no explosive signature. The ship had simply been destroyed by an unknown force. In the hidden command center on Kepler 442c, Dr. Park watched the destruction through long-range sensors. The Vorthak ship was gone, reduced to scattered wreckage floating in space. "Captain," Lee looked at the readings with amazement. "Direct hit. Complete destruction. The projectile passed straight through their shields and armor like they were not even there." Engineer Choi was already preparing the railgun for a second shot, just in case other Vorthak ships appeared. "Recharge time is 6 minutes. We can fire again if needed." Lieutenant Kim monitored the communication channels for any response to the ship's destruction. No distress signals were transmitted. The Vorthak ship was destroyed too quickly to send a warning. Dr. Park allowed himself a small smile of satisfaction. For years, the galaxy had dismissed human technology as primitive and worthless. They were about to learn that primitiveness could be the most advanced approach of all. "Send a message to Admiral Yoon," he ordered. "Tell her the field test was completely successful." The message was simple, but its implications would reshape the entire galaxy. Humanity had just proven that it possessed weapons capable of destroying any ship in known space. The age of energy weapon supremacy was about to end. The emergency session of the Galactic Council began just 12 hours after the Dominance Eternal was destroyed. Representatives from across known space gathered in the main chamber, their voices creating a mixture of sounds that the translation systems struggled to handle. Counselor Vexathara of the Hegemony stood at the central podium, her usually calm appearance cracked with barely hidden anger. Her silver skin seemed to glow brighter than normal, which was a sign of stress among her people. "A Vorthak Empire warship has been completely destroyed," she announced to the assembled delegates. The vessel Dominance Eternal was reduced to debris in the Kepler 442 system. Analysis of the wreckage shows evidence of kinetic impact at impossible velocities. The chamber erupted in confused voices. War Commander Thexalis of the Draconian Empire stood up from his seat, his dragon-like, features twisted with concern. What weapon could achieve such destruction? He demanded. Our intelligence reports show no energy signatures at the time of the attack. Ambassador Quan Te Ho sat quietly in the human delegation area, his expression carefully neutral. Next to him, Admiral Yoon Ji-woo reviewed a datapad that contained information about humanity's mining operations in the disputed system. Science Prime Kelvar of the Nexari Consortium activated a holographic display that showed the debris field, where the Vorthak ship had been destroyed. The wreckage was spread across thousands of kilometers of space, but there was something strange about the pattern. The destruction appears to have been caused by a single impact, Kelvar reported. There is a clear entry and exit point through the ship's hull, but the energy requirements to accelerate any projectile to such velocities should be impossible. Park Min-soo, who was attending as a technical advisor, listened carefully to the analysis. The aliens were struggling to understand something that human scientists had mastered centuries ago. Electromagnetic acceleration was not mysterious or impossible. It was simple physics applied with precision. Perhaps we are looking at this. Problem incorrectly, Dr. Park said, standing slowly from his seat. The chamber fell silent. A human was about to speak about military technology to some of the greatest scientific minds in the galaxy. Most of the delegates expected to be amused by primitive human theories. You see, Dr. Park continued, walking toward the center of the chamber, your civilizations have spent so much time perfecting energy manipulation that you have forgotten basic principles of physics. Counselor Vexathera's silver skin darkened, which was a sign of irritation. You are suggesting that your species has discovered something that escaped our scientists? Not discovered, Dr. Park replied calmly. Remembered. Captain Lee So-young activated a portable holographic projector that she had brought to the meeting. The image that appeared showed the basic design of a railgun, two parallel rails with electromagnetic coils arranged along their length. We call it a railgun, Captain Lee explained. It uses electromagnetic fields to accelerate projectiles to relativistic velocities. The concept is quite simple. The chamber erupted in noise as delegates argued with each other. Some laughed at the idea that humans could build such a weapon. Others demanded to see proof that the device could actually work. You are claiming that this primitive device destroyed one of our most advanced warships? War Commander Thexalis asked, his voice dripping with disbelief. Admiral Yoon stood up, her voice cutting through the chaos. We are not claiming anything, War Commander. We are simply demonstrating that humanity approaches problem-solving differently than other species. Engineer Choi Dong-hyun, who had been quietly taking notes, added his own analysis. Your energy weapons are certainly impressive, but they have inherent limitations. Beam dispersal over distance, power requirements, heat dissipation. These problems become worse as you try to increase range and power. Kinetic weapons do not have these limitations, Dr. Park continued. A projectile moving at 12% of light speed carries enormous energy, regardless of how far it has traveled. Science Prime Kelvar studied the holographic display with growing understanding. The mathematics are elegant, but the engineering precision required would be staggering. Precision that your species abandoned when you decided that energy. Weapons were more advanced, Captain Lee replied. The implications of what the humans were saying began to sink in. If they could build one railgun, they could build hundreds. If they could destroy one ship, they could destroy entire fleets. The galaxy's military balance was suddenly in question. Lieutenant Kim Hyejin, monitoring communications from the human ship, received an urgent message. She whispered to Admiral Yoon, who nodded grimly before standing to address the council. There is something else the council should know, Admiral Yoon announced. Our deep space monitoring stations have detected 7 more railgun platforms under construction in human space. The chamber went completely silent. 7 more weapons like the one that had destroyed the Dominance Eternal meant that humanity could threaten any ship in their local star systems. You are building a fleet of these weapons? Counselor Vexathera asked, her voice showing the first signs of fear. We are defending ourselves, Admiral Yoon replied simply. Recent events have shown that some species do not respect the mining agreements established by this council. War Commander Thexalis leaned forward, his predatory eyes fixed on the human delegation. Are you threatening the members of this council? Dr. Park returned to his seat before answering. We are not threatening anyone, War Commander. We are simply explaining why attacking human ships is no longer advisable. The message was clear without being directly stated. Any species that interfered with human operations would face the same fate as the Dominance Eternal. The railguns could reach any target within their range, and their range was growing as more platforms came online. Science Prime Kelvar was still studying the railgun specifications with fascination. The projectile velocity you claim to achieve. How do you maintain accuracy over interplanetary distances? Targeting computers and gravitational calculations, Engineer Choi answered. When your projectile moves at 12% of light speed, you do not need to lead your target very much. But the power requirements, Kelvar continued, are manageable when you use electromagnetic induction properly, Dr. Park finished. Your energy weapons try to create and control exotic particles. Our railguns use the fundamental forces that govern the universe. Counselor Vexthara realized that the discussion was moving away from politics and toward technology transfer. If other species learned how to build railguns, the balance of power would shift dramatically. This session is temporarily suspended, she announced. The Council needs time to consider the implications of these new developments. As delegates began filing out of the chamber, small groups formed to discuss what they had just learned. The hegemony representatives huddled together, clearly worried about their military superiority. The Draconian Empire's delegation was arguing about whether humans were bluffing about their weapons capabilities. Ambassador Quan gathered the human delegation and led them toward their ship. As they walked through the corridors of the Council station, other species representatives watched them with new expressions. The dismissive amusement was gone, replaced by wariness and calculation. How long before they try to steal our technology? Captain Lee asked quietly. They are already trying, Lieutenant Kim replied. I have detected 17 different scanning attempts on our ship since the meeting ended. Dr. Park smiled grimly. Let them scan. They will find nothing useful without understanding the principles behind the technology. Admiral Yoon looked back at the council chamber they had just left. Everything changes now. We are no longer the primitive newcomers begging for scraps. No, Dr. Park agreed. Now we are the species that everyone else needs to worry about. As the human delegation departed, emergency meetings began throughout the galaxy. Military leaders demanded crash programs to develop kinetic weapons. Scientists scrambled to understand principles they had abandoned centuries ago. Politicians calculated the costs of remaining on humanity's good side. The galaxy's power structure, unchanged for 1,000 years, was crumbling. And it had all started with humans remembering that. Sometimes the simplest solutions were the most effective ones. 6 months after the destruction of the Dominance Eternal, Dr. Park Min-soo walked through a very different Galactic Council station. The corridors that had once echoed with dismissive laughter about human primitiveness were now filled with hushed conversations about kinetic weapons and electromagnetic acceleration. The council chamber itself had been restructured. The human delegation no longer sat in the newcomers section at the back. Their seats had been moved to the inner circle, close to the most powerful species in the galaxy. Ambassador Quan Tae-ho found himself fielding requests and proposals instead of submitting applications for basic rights. The change had not happened overnight. In the weeks following the emergency session, every major power in the galaxy had attempted to reverse engineer railgun technology. Their efforts had produced mixed results at best. Captain Lee So-young reviewed the latest intelligence reports in the human delegation's private meeting room. The Nexari Consortium managed to build a working prototype last month, she reported to the assembled team. But their projectile only reached 3% of light speed. The Vorthak Empire's attempts have been even less successful, added Lieutenant Kim Hye-jin. Their latest test destroyed their own launch platform when the electromagnetic coils overloaded. Dr. Park nodded as he read through the technical analysis. The aliens had the basic principles correct, but they lacked the engineering precision that humans had developed over centuries of working with kinetic weapons. Building a railgun that could fire once was relatively simple. Building one that could fire repeatedly without destroying itself required knowledge that the galaxy had forgotten. Engineer Choi Dong-hyun entered the room carrying a datapad filled with construction reports. The orbital defense grid around Earth is now complete, he announced. 15 railgun platforms in high orbit, each one capable of engaging targets out to 10 million kilometers. The orbital defense grid represented the culmination of human military engineering. Each platform could rotate freely in three-dimensional space, target multiple enemies simultaneously, and manufacture its own ammunition from raw materials. More importantly, the platforms were networked together, allowing them to coordinate attacks and share targeting data. What about the requests for technical assistance? Admiral Yoon Ji-woo asked as she joined the meeting. Ambassador Kwan opened a folder containing dozens of formal proposals from various alien governments. The hegemony is offering exclusive trade agreements in exchange for railgun technology. The Draconian Empire wants to establish a joint research project. Even some of the minor species are asking for defensive systems. The requests had started arriving within days of the council session. Species that had once ignored humanity were now desperate to acquire the technology that had made humans the galaxy's newest military power. The offers ranged from valuable resources to political alliances to territorial concessions. Any responses from the Vorthak Empire? Dr. Park asked. 3 formal apologies and a request for a non-aggression pact, Kwan replied. They are also offering to pay compensation for the harassment of our mining operations. The transformation of the Vorthak Empire's attitude had been the most dramatic. The species that had once considered humans barely worth intimidating now treated them with careful respect. No Vorthak ship had entered human space without permission since the dominance. Eternal was destroyed. Lieutenant Kim looked up from her communication console. We are receiving a priority message from the mining operations in Kepler 442. They report that several minor species have requested protection from the major powers. This was an unexpected development. Smaller civilizations that had been bullied by the galaxy's superpowers were now approaching humanity for help. They saw the railguns as a way to level the playing field against species that had oppressed them for centuries. How many requests? Admiral Yoon asked. 17 so far, Kim replied. They are calling humanity the kinetic lords and asking us to establish defensive platforms in their star systems. Dr. Park considered the implications. Providing railgun defense systems to minor species would extend human influence across the galaxy. It would also create a network of allies who depended on human technology for their survival. What does Earth's government want us to do? Captain Lee asked. Ambassador Kwan smiled slightly. Earth's government is very interested in expanding our sphere of influence. They have authorized us to negotiate mutual defense agreements with any species that requests our assistance. The meeting was interrupted by an announcement that the council session was beginning. As the human delegation made their way to the chamber, other species representatives watched them with expressions that ranged from respect to fear to desperate hope. Inside the chamber, Councillor Vexithara called the session to order. Her silver skin had lost some of its luster over the past months, a sign of the stress that the new galactic situation had caused. Today's agenda includes territorial disputes in the Andorian sector, she announced. The hegemony and the consortium have conflicting claims to the mining rights. The dispute was typical of the problems that had plagued the galaxy for centuries. Two powerful species wanted the same resources, and the weaker civilizations in the area would suffer regardless of who won. Dr. Park stood up from his seat. Perhaps the Council would consider an alternative solution. Vexathara looked at him with wariness. What kind of alternative? The disputed sector could be placed under neutral protection, Dr. Park suggested. Humanity would be willing to establish defensive platforms to ensure that mining operations remain peaceful. The chamber erupted in discussion. The idea of neutral protection backed by railgun platforms would prevent either the hegemony or the consortium from simply taking what they wanted by force. War Commander Thexalis of the Draconian Empire objected immediately. You are suggesting that humans become the galaxy's police force? I am suggesting that disputes be settled through negotiation rather than military force, Dr. Park replied calmly. The presence of kinetic weapons platforms would encourage all parties to find peaceful solutions. Science Prime Kelvar of the Nexari Consortium had been studying human proposals for weeks. The mathematics support their claims. A single railgun platform could disable any fleet we could send to the disputed sector. The truth was undeniable. Humanity's kinetic weapons had made traditional fleet actions obsolete. Energy shields and armor plating that had protected warships for centuries were useless against projectiles moving at 12% of light speed. Ambassador Quan stood to address the council. Humanity does not seek to dominate the galaxy through military force. We simply want to ensure that smaller species are not bullied by larger ones. And if someone refuses to accept your protection? Vexathara asked. Admiral Yoon answered the question with quiet confidence. Then they would be free to resolve their disputes using traditional methods. But they would do so without threatening species under human protection. The message was clear. Humanity would not force their protection on anyone, but they would defend their allies with devastating effectiveness. The railgun platforms orbiting Earth were just the beginning of a defensive network that could eventually span the galaxy. As the session continued, votes were taken on various proposals. The pattern was always the same. Species that had once dominated through military strength now found themselves negotiating as equals. The age of conquest through superior energy weapons was ending. Dr. Park watched the proceedings with satisfaction. Just 1 year ago, humans had been dismissed as primitive newcomers playing with rocks. Now they were setting the terms for galactic diplomacy. Engineer Choi leaned over to whisper an update. The construction crews have finished the railgun platform for the Zelani Republic. It will be operational next week. The Zelani Republic had been one of the first minor species to request human protection. Their star system was rich in rare minerals, making them a constant target for aggressive neighbors. A single railgun platform would make their system too dangerous to attack. Captain Lee reviewed the list of similar projects under construction. 12 more platforms scheduled for completion over the next 6 months, each one extending the range of our defensive network. The network was growing faster than anyone had anticipated. As word spread about the effectiveness of human protection, more species requested defensive agreements. Each new alliance expanded humanity's influence and created additional buffer zones around human space. Lieutenant Kim monitored communications from across the galaxy. Reports indicate that 3 major powers are developing new diplomatic initiatives specifically to avoid conflicts with human allies. The galaxy was learning to fear the consequences of aggressive behavior. Energy weapons that had once guaranteed victory were now useless against an enemy that could strike from millions of kilometers away with unstoppable kinetic projectiles. As the council session ended, delegates from dozens of species approached the human delegation with various proposals. Trade agreements, research partnerships, requests for protection. The species that had once ignored humanity now competed for their attention. Admiral Yoon gathered her team as they prepared to return to their ship. "Status report on the home defense systems?"